Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plumb the depths of God's Word, seeking wisdom for our walk. This is the Deep Dive.
So, have you ever found yourself kind of in that spot, feeling a bit caught, between your faith and what science seems to be saying? It's this feeling like, can you be a person of real faith, but also, a rational thinker in today's world? And for a lot of people, that whole tension really comes to a head with one topic: evolution. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a pretty interesting book. It's called Monkey Business: Critical Facts About the Theory of Evolution Every Believer Should Know. Now, this book, it jumps right in. It says that for some, evolution has felt like maybe one of the biggest challenges to Christianity, even leading people to doubt. But then it asks this really provocative question. What if the theory itself actually has some major flaws when you look closely? What if you don't actually have to choose between science and believing in a creator?
Yeah, and before we even get into the arguments, it's helpful to know where the author's coming from. He mentions being a natural skeptic, didn't grow up Christian, needed, objective evidence to really commit. He actually spent years formally studying this stuff, science, faith, at a top university, just to tackle these questions for himself.
That context is pretty important, isn't it? It's not just a casual opinion.
Exactly. Rigorous personal search.
And he shares this story that really highlights why this matters so much, about a student, Jambo, from mainland China. Super bright guy. Jambo was open to the Bible, amazed by its prophecies even, but he kept hitting this wall, constantly asking, but what about evolution? He'd been taught it his whole life as fact. And the author admits back then he just didn't have good answers for him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Jambo didn't commit to faith. The book uses that to say, look, we can't just ignore this issue if we want a faith that holds up,
Makes sense. You have to address the tough questions.
Right. And that's what Monkey Business tries to do. It lays out what it sees as 5 major problems with the theory of evolution. So let's unpack those. What does the book actually argue?
Okay, so the first couple of problems the book tackles are about the evidence itself. Problem number 1. It claims there's no empirical evidence for macroevolution. And it's pretty specific here. It argues, for something to be truly scientific, you need observable, repeatable data, experiments.
Okay, but hold on. We see evolution happening, don't we? Like antibiotic resistance in bacteria or different dog breeds.
Wow.
How does the book handle that?
Right, good question. The book calls that microevolution. Small changes within a species, like you said, dog breeds, bacteria adapting. That's observable. It happens. The book accepts that.
Okay.
But it draws a line. It says we've never observed macroevolution, meaning like one kind of creature fundamentally changing into a totally different kind, a reptile becoming a bird, or, the book's example, a dog turning into a cat.
That big jump between types.
Exactly. That large-scale transformation. The book argues that's never been seen in a lab, never observed directly. So, from that perspective, it remains an unproven hypothesis.
Gotcha. So a distinction between small adaptations and fundamentally new kinds of creatures. If lab evidence is lacking for macroevolution, according to the book, what about the past? The fossils. That brings us to the second problem it raises. The fossil record fails to support evolution.
Yeah, this is a core point for the book. It reminds us Darwin himself expected. Well, he thought we'd find tons of intermediate species, the missing links, showing those gradual changes over time. He figured the fossil record would eventually fill up with them.
Right. That was his prediction. So does the book say that happened?
No, quite the opposite. It actually quotes a Harvard biologist, Stephen Jay Gould, pointing out that those smooth, gradual transitions, mostly, they just aren't seen. Yeah. The book argues the fossil record generally shows species appearing suddenly in the rock layers, fully formed, not slowly morphing. So those so-called missing links, the book contends, are still, missing. The gaps are real, not just artifacts of an incomplete record, according to this view.
That's definitely a challenge to the standard picture many people have, appearing suddenly, fully formed. Okay, so if the empirical evidence and the fossil record are questioned, what about the mechanisms proposed for evolution? Let's talk natural selection. That's problem 3, right? Natural selection cannot add new features.
Exactly. We usually think of natural selection as survival of the fittest, right? The best adapted ones pass on their traits. But the book makes a really crucial point here. It says natural selection only filters information that's already there.
Filters. What does that mean exactly?
It means it works with the genetic variation already present in a population. It can favor certain existing traits, make the group better suited, sure. But The book argues it can't create brand new genetic information for totally new features or organs.
Ah, okay, so it can choose the best option from what's available, but it can't invent a new option.
Precisely. The book uses this analogy. It's like shuffling a deck of cards.
Yeah.
You can get different hands, maybe better ones, but you can't suddenly pull out a joker if it wasn't in the deck to start with. The potential has to exist already.
That's a clear analogy. Okay, so if natural selection only filters, where does new information come from? People usually point to mutations, right? But that leads straight into the book's fourth point. Mutations cannot account for speciation.
Right. The common idea is that random mutations create the new stuff, the raw material for natural selection to work on, eventually leading to new species. But monkey business pushes back hard on that. It argues that mutations, these random changes in DNA, are overwhelmingly harmful, or neutral at best.
Degenerative.
Degenerative,
Yeah.
not beneficial. Usually you hear about potentially helpful mutations.
Well, the book's point is that DNA is incredibly complex, like, sophisticated code. If you randomly change bits of that code, are you likely to create a useful new feature, or are you more likely to break something? Probably break something, I guess.
That's the argument. Mutations tend to corrupt or reduce information, not build the complex, integrated new information needed for, say, wings to evolve from non-wings or eyes from scratch. Random errors don't typically build complex machines.
Okay, so the book sees mutations as degrading information, not creating the basis for new species. Which brings us to the fifth, and maybe the most fundamental problem the book raises, the origin of life itself.
Yeah, this one goes right back to the beginning. How did non-living chemicals become the very first living thing? The book emphasizes just how complex even the simplest possible life form is. Even a basic virus, it says, is astoundingly complex. Its DNA or RNA has thousands, maybe tens of thousands of letters that have to be in a precise sequence to work to replicate.
So the chances of that just happening randomly, what does the book say about that probability?
It argues it's statistically impossible. Like, the odds are so astronomically small that appealing to chance just isn't a reasonable scientific explanation. It also points out that Darwin himself didn't really explain this. He sort of assumed life started somehow, maybe in a warm little pond, but didn't propose a mechanism for non-life to become life.
So the very foundation where the first life came from is presented as a major unsolved problem for the theory.
Exactly. The book argues that without a plausible start, the whole evolutionary story rests on shaky ground.
Okay, let's pull these threads together. We've got challenges to empirical evidence for macroevolution, the fossil record, natural selection's creative power, mutations as a source of novelty, and the origin of life. So putting it all together, what's the book's big takeaway here? It sounds like it's making quite a bold claim about why evolution is taught.
It really is. What's fascinating, or maybe controversial, depending on your view, is the conclusion it draws. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the theory of evolution is so dominant not just because the scientific evidence is ironclad, but also because it's basically the only major explanation widely accepted in science that doesn't require invoking a supernatural creator.
Ah, so it's suggesting there might be a philosophical element at play, not just pure science.
That seems to be the implication. It's challenging the idea that the debate is always played on a perfectly level, purely objective scientific field.
Okay, so for you, listening right now, maybe wrestling with these same questions, where does this leave you? What's the book's ultimate message? It talks about rock-solid confidence.
Yeah, the end goal seems to be empowerment. It basically says, look, you don't have to be a top scientist or a theologian to have a faith that makes sense, that's reasonable. By presenting these arguments, it aims to give everyday believers confidence that there are real scientific reasons to question the standard evolutionary narrative.
So the conflict isn't really faith versus science.
But faith versus this specific theory, which, the book argues, has significant evidential problems. That's the core message. It's framed as a 6-day study designed to give clear answers.
So if you found yourself asking these kinds of questions, maybe like Jimbo, or you just want to feel more equipped for conversations, this book is positioned as, well, a really helpful starting point.
Absolutely. It really prompts you to think. What could exploring these arguments mean for your own confidence, both intellectually and spiritually? Getting into the details the book provides.
To check out Monkey Business for yourself and find more resources for building a faith that really holds up, you can visit www.fastmissions.com. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We definitely encourage you to grab a copy of Monkey Business and wrestle with these big questions yourself.
And that is it for today's episode of The Deep Dive. Remember the truths we've uncovered from God's Word. May His wisdom guide your steps and illuminate your path always. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep living God's truth.